Retro vs. Remake. The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. Hello, I'm Prince B, and today we're looking at some of the changes in Majora's Mask for the 3DS from the Nintendo 64 and GameCube ports. Before we begin, a few disclaimers. First, this will obviously contain spoilers, so if you aren't interested in that and haven't played the game yet and want to keep the experience spoiler-free, go ahead and click out of the video and come back when you're done. Also, I can't comment on how the controls work with the new 3DS, as I'm playing it on the regular 3DS XL without the new analog stick. With that out of the way, let's get started. First things first, this game has been bumped up from an E rating to E10. This definitely fits since the game has some dark themes, and some things that could scare smaller children. And of course, redeads are no joke. This is likely due to the E10 not existing when this game first came out, but now that it does. Next, let's talk about the graphics. Everything looks great. Colors are improved, looking more vibrant, character models look cleaner, textures are more detailed, animation looks smoother as well. Some things were also changed, such as the twisted hallway to Termina now being made out of roots. Another graphic change was the Garo mask, which no longer resembles the regular Garos in Ikana, but rather the Garo Master in Stone Tower. This fits nicely since when summoned the Garos always said, "You called, Master?" But this didn't make a lot of sense, since the Garo mask was just of a regular Garo hood and not the Garo Master. A minor change, but one I like. There was only one place I felt like the graphics just flat out didn't work, and that was Woodfall Temple. To emphasize the swamp water as being poisonous, it was changed from a dark purple to bright pink, and it makes the screen kind of hard to look at. Other than that though, the graphics were great. Some people worried the improved graphics would detract from the dark atmosphere of the game, but I disagree. I feel as though one of the strengths of Majora's Mask was that it felt dark through the characters, music, and storytelling, rather than just being dark visually. Overall, a great job. As far as music and sound go, most of it is more or less unchanged. It may have been touched up a little, but it's still just as good as the original. On that note, however, sometimes there was some kind of distortion from the 3DS itself if the volume was too high. Next, let's talk controls. Everything feels pretty good. Controls feel more fluid, and I really like the ability to have 4 items mapped to buttons at once, especially since there are so many masks that you want access to just on a whim. On that note, you can now unequip masks from the menu by placing a new item over it, which is a pretty cool change. The gyroscopic controls are also implemented pretty well here for aiming and taking pictures. I'm not a huge fan of things like that, but it worked really nicely here. It also makes the archery minigames kind of a joke. In the original, I spent a good 2 or 3 hours doing the archery minigames, but on this, I got a perfect twice in a row on each game with no problem. I think that to compensate, they should have made the games a little bit harder to maintain some sort of challenge. Other minor control changes include Goron Link, who can now roll without you holding the A button constantly, and Zora Link now requires magic to swim as fast constantly. I'd say the change to Goron Link is great, but the Zora Link change is something I don't quite agree with. I get that to go max speed, Goron Link also needs magic, but without magic, Zora Link just feels really slow, and even feels kind of hard to control at times. Now let's talk about some big things that were either changed or added in. First, if you watched my review of the game proper, you know I didn't like the save system in the game. Well, now you can use a save statue just by examining it, so you can save any time even if you haven't completed the first cycle. Also, while you can still only warp to the same areas as before, there are statues that just allow saving that have been added to most areas and even into the dungeons. This is a great change which makes it easier to play without committing to a long play session. The Song of Time now no longer saves the game though. However, the Song of Double Time can now move you to any hour in the day, reducing a lot of the waiting on side quests and what have you. Speaking of time, it feels like the time flows a bit faster, though I haven't sat down and timed it out to confirm this. Also of note, the Western games now have the ability to save 3 save files for the first time, so that's a great change. When playing hide and seek with the bombers, at the beginning of the game, their locations have changed, with one being in each section of town, instead of some of them hiding right next to each other. I'm guessing this is mainly to let players know the existence of the laundry pool that you could miss in the past. The bomber's notebook is now given to you by the Happy Mask salesman, so you don't need to play with the bombers a second time, and the notebook now tracks much more. Most events and side quests are cataloged here. This makes it much easier to track the many events of this game, but it can be annoying to get a message every time you do something, and it kind of breaks up the gameplay a bit, and not in a good way. Overall, useful for players who aren't as good at managing things or don't have experience with the original, but for veterans it may be more annoying than helpful. Lastly, the bombers will occasionally come up to you and give you hints about starting some of the more obscure events and side quests. Next, one that just about everyone knows already, is that they added in a fishing hole a la Ocarina of Time to the swamp and one also to the ocean area. This is cool if you liked the fishing minigames from Ocarina of Time, but you don't really get anything as far as I've experienced so far for catching all the fish or whatever. Um, at the very least, I can confirm that there aren't any pieces of heart, masks, or items that you get, so this appears to be totally 100% optional. Uh, I think it would have been really cool if they'd made it so you get a piece of heart for fishing in each one, maybe take the heart pieces from the shooting galleries and move them here, so that you don't have to do each shooting game twice. I don't know. Overall, I don't care too much for them, although you can in fact wear the Fierce Deity's mask in here, and it's pretty funny to see the War God flailing in the water. You can also encourage different fish to appear by wearing different masks, so it's cool to see some of the less useful ones gain added utility. Also, you can get fishing passes that can be used to pay the 50 rupee cost, and you don't lose them when going back in time. You get them for winning some mini games or doing some side quests, and it's pretty cool that you still get something for completing a task that you did in a previous cycle. There was an extra bottle added in for doing a new side quest involving the Gorman brothers. I don't think an extra bottle was needed since you can get 6, now 7 of them, but the side quest does help flesh out these characters a bit more. If I had to guess, it was probably because there are 7 Zora eggs, so if you happen to have all 7 bottles, then you don't have to take a trip back to the laboratory and deposit the eggs there. You can just go right ahead and continue collecting them all. Finally, one of the biggest quote-unquote additions to the game was the revamped boss battles. To explain, each boss now has a large eye somewhere on its body, likely to thematically tie them all together. I was very, very worried about this when I first heard it, because I was afraid that it would turn all the bosses into shoot with an arrow type of bosses, like Goma from various Zelda iterations. Luckily, this isn't the case exactly. While you do still need to shoot or damage the eye, usually the easiest way being with the bow, especially in the case of the first 2 bosses, to reveal the eye, you have to use your various transformation masks associated with that temple. I actually like this quite a bit, as it emphasizes the use of those masks, whereas in the original, these bosses could be beaten without them. Georg and Twin Mold's battles were changed a bit more than the other guys, though. But again, it emphasizes the masks that go with those dungeons. Georg's focus is more on strategically using the environment, which is pretty cool, and Twin Mold's fight changes how the Giant's Mask is used, essentially letting you just start smashing Twin Mold. Rather than slashing him with the sword, you go into like a berserker mode. I did think that this was really cool, but I also found the Twin Mold fight to drag on a bit too long. So while the concept of the change was good, I'd say the execution was just a bit lacking. Now let's cover some of the more minor things that were either taken out or changed. First, as stated earlier, some things were moved slightly in their areas. For instance, the Song of Soaring is now learned as soon as you enter the swamp. The emblem on Stone Tower was moved to be more easily noticed, like you can't miss it now. And the bank was moved to behind the clock tower, making it faster to warp and deposit rupees before you reset a cycle. Also, the main area of Clocktown itself was made larger. I'm not really sure why on that one. There seems to be no real reason for it. Uh, Speaking of locations, the location of both the Stone Mask and the Giant's Mask were changed. The Stone Mask is now in the Pirate's Fortress, which is good as this is the main place it's used and thus makes a bit more sense, though you can't get it quite as early as you could before. Uh, the way of obtaining it is still the same, however. The Giant's Mask was moved into the Twin Mold's room, and you get it after beating the first half of the battle. It makes sense given how the fight was changed, and also makes it very, very obvious that that battle is what it's for. Um, Another minor change was that in the town trading post you can buy magic beans. I thought, this is really cool, right? Nope, they cost 100 rupees each. When this is really bad because a business scrub right in the swamp, right next to the warp, sells them for 10 rupees each. And you also can't even buy them until you encounter the bean seller beneath the Deku Palace, likely to prevent sequence breaking, but the reason they give in game is laughably horrible. They say that you aren't certified to use magic beans. Okay, it makes sense when you need to be certified to use heavy explosives like the powdered keg, but magic beans? Are they like afraid I'm going to plant them in someone's ear? I don't get it. Um, at the level of restriction they put on them, they may as well not have even added to them into the town shop. It was just a bad change. Uh, in the original, on the final day, you could enter the milk bar even without the Romani's mask. This was useful for getting an extra bottle from the Cafe and Anju side quest before entering the first dungeon. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. Also, for that side quest, you can no longer get the room key unless you have the Goron mask. While not huge, it does mean that that's 100 less rupees you can farm in the early game. Um, let's see, the Gibdo Well quest now only requires you to get one of each item instead of multiples. For example, you only need one magic bean instead of five. I'd say that's a pretty good change. A pretty good change. It just saves you a few rupees here and there. In Great Bay Temple, it was unchanged in terms of the actual layout, but the areas you can't reach due to the water flowing in the wrong direction are now closed off, making it more clear which way you're supposed to go. And Stone Tower's puzzle, where you had to pick up a box and place it on a switch, now uses a block instead, making it more obvious what you need to do. You can't accidentally break the box. So that was a pretty good change. Lastly, ice arrows were nerfed a little bit. You can't freeze things unless they have a blue sparkle around them, likely to make it more clear exactly where you need to aim them, but I don't feel like it was a really necessary change. Lastly, there's one more big change that I wanted to save till the end to talk about. Um, and it's just because it's not exclusive to this game. It's something I've been noticing cropping up in a lot of the more modern Zelda, or the remakes in the more modern Zelda games. Uh, I think it's a trend that started with Skyward Sword. It's appeared in Ocarina of Time, it appeared in this, and it also appeared in Link Between Worlds. And that's the use of some sort of hint mechanic. Uh, this game, like Ocarina of Time 3DS, uses a big gossip stone that you can crawl inside and get hints referred to as visions. Um, you could also do something similar in Skyward Sword, and A Link Between Worlds had the hint ghosts that you could see with the special glasses or whatever. Um, and I get that this is a thing where it's like, oh well, if you don't need them, just don't use them. But it goes to a trend that I'm starting to notice that's got me kind of worried. Uh, I get that it really helps younger players get through the game because they may not be as good at solving all the puzzles or figuring out exactly where you need to go. But it also kind of smacks of hand holding, which is something that I don't think is necessarily good. Uh, for example, if you look at the original Zelda game, it gave you very little in the way of hints, and it's regarded as one of the most classic games ever. Uh, it really encouraged you to go out and explore the world and think about what you need to do, like problem solve. Uh, I'm kind of worried that these gossip stones and whatever, all these hints are kind of just eliminating the element of exploration from the game series. I can't say it's definitively bad because it does have some merit for less experienced players, and I get that you don't have to leave them, but it's just a growing trend I'm noticing, and I wanted to bring attention to it. I think that covers most, if not all, of the changes. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments. There were a lot of changes to keep track of, so I apologize if I missed anything. Also, let me know what you thought of these changes. Overall, I enjoyed the game, though I wouldn't say it's necessarily superior to the original. Graphically, I would say it's better, and some mechanics like saving and the buffed Song of Double Time I really liked. But there are some changes that I also don't like Zora Link swimming, and some that I didn't really care for either way, like the fishing. I would say that if you enjoy Zelda and Majora's Mask in particular, you should check this out if you haven't already. Likewise, if you didn't like the original, you may want to give this version another look to see if any of these changes addressed something that you didn't like. Thanks for watching as always. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're interested in seeing some stuff I'll be releasing in the future, and if you haven't already, check out my full review of Majora's Mask, where I cover the original in a bit more depth and even analyze some of the themes in the game.